Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tech Leaders Hub Fintech episode number 2. Joining me today is Aleksander Czarnowski. Alex, how are you doing today?
Hi, thanks. I'm very well. How about you?
I'm super excited to be doing this, really. We just had a very nice conversation even leading up to this. So I'm super excited, to talk about fintech cybersecurity today and just to give you a chance to share your knowledge with everybody watching.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited too. It's not every day a chance to share with such a wonderful crowd my experience and to make an analogy about building planes without parachute and building software without security in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of the reason why we're here today, to tell you, dear watchers and listeners, especially those who are in fintech, how you can give your business a parachute, give it a safety layer. That's part of the conversation today. First order of business: if you can hear us and if you can see us, please leave a comment. Let us know you're here. Say hi, just so we know everything on a technical level is working correctly. Second order of business: while people are still joining us, Alex, who do you hope is tuning in today? Who is going to benefit from our conversation today?
Well, honestly speaking, I think everyone and anyone can benefit at least a bit from our conversation, because cybersecurity is a complex matter that actually touches nowadays, thanks to digital transformation and even more thanks to COVID situation, is touching basically every our daily activity. And with the introduction of IoT market, it will be the impact of cybersecurity will be even more crucial to our daily activities.
Yeah. I've read a lot about how these Internet of Things devices make us even more exposed, and that's a crucial thing to think about as well. Some people are already saying hi. So hello, Victor, Michał, Lucas. Thanks for joining us today. And before we get into, your background, your experience, before we get into all of that, the part that people sometimes skip when they listen to podcasts, I want to give some value from the very start. This is a bit of a ritual and a bit of a habit that we have here at Tech Leaders Hub. So, Alex, I would phrase the question like this: what is your number one tip for people involved in managing cybersecurity?
Well, as I said, the cybersecurity is a quite complex issue, and as time flies by, the complexity unfortunately increases, which is a huge problem by itself. So don't try to solve every single problem by yourself, especially considering that some problems cannot be simply solved but by adding more people to the process. Instead, try to employ all of the new technologies and try to automate those things that can be automated. Not everything can be automated. That has to be said from the very beginning. And for example, there is still plenty of room, for example, for manual penetration testing, because the quality of those, if done by knowledgeable team, is way beyond anything just as any even the best automatic tools nowadays can deliver. And the same also applies, for example, to container security, when while the initial hardening process can be done manually, it cannot be done manually further. You need to do it using some kind of automation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this can segue us right into, a little bit of your background, because thank you for this, first of all, and thank you for, helping me deliver value up front here. But you do mention container security, and I believe there's a reason for it here. So can you tell us a little bit more, on this occasion about, yourself, what you're involved in right now? You're CEO at Defenselayers and AVETINS. Can you tell us about what you do in both of those roles?
Absolutely, yeah. Defenselayers is a cybersecurity startup that manufactures what we call secure containers. The basic idea is quite simple, because the whole container ecosystem is missing trust, and trust is a base for any security you can think about it. If you remove trust, especially think about two people. If you want those people to cooperate, you need some kind of both understanding and trust. The same rules apply to IT systems. IT systems or IT components, or for example, microservices, they need to trust in one way or another to each other. And again, that brings the complexity issue. So defense layers is removing the complexity of hardening, the knowledge required to harden your containers, and especially also the knowledge in compliance field. And this is very special for fintechs, since fintech sector is not as strongly regulated, and thanks God for that, as for example, banking sector. However, it still needs to apply to some general regulation like GDPR, for example. And on the other hand, in a long run, probably most fintechs will need to, in one way or another, cooperate with the banking or insurance sector, for example, or payment sectors. And those sectors are pretty heavily regulated. So instead, the main idea behind defense layers is that instead of trying to be best at cybersecurity, why don't you just download a secure container image and be best at the innovative service you would like to deliver, while not being worried about security of the containers you are using to host your services or applications.
I see.
Before I started Defense Layers, I was running and still running a cybersecurity consulting company that started in '97. So that, as everyone knows, those were the years when dinosaurs were walking on Earth in IT.
Yeah, I believe I was 5 back then.
Okay. Well, yeah, that puts me into position of thinking how old I am today, but the time flies quickly. But anyway, back then, what's called today cybersecurity, we basically invented most parts of cybersecurity market back then, because nobody was talking about cybersecurity. It was either information or IT security. And as a bleeding edge technology back then, it was either an antivirus software. It wasn't even called malware. There were viruses, Trojan horses, and logic bombs. Nobody remembers logic bombs anymore, for example. And firewall and encryption was a bleeding edge safeguard in what we would call today cybersecurity. So that the world has evolved enormously, but that's what's really interesting in cybersecurity. That I know that me and our teams in both companies, every day we wake up and we know there is a whole set of new challenges we can pick up, and that's really great and exciting.
Exciting. Some people, I bet, would think, there's a whole set of challenges, and that's, that can be intimidating, right? There's so much to deal with, but I suppose they have companies like yours that can help. You touched upon a lot here, and first of all, I'm just very excited to be speaking with somebody who has so much experience in this field. One thing that stood out to me is you mentioned, the complexities involved in fintech as opposed to the complexities involved for, financial institutions, larger financial companies. I know that the people joining us come from both types of institutions, and to all of you watching, I got Alex here for us for an hour, mostly to answer your questions, right? So if you can indicate whether you're mostly from fintech or mostly from financial institutions, leave a comment and we will steer the conversation in that direction so it's more relevant for you. For now, though, we were focusing on the idea of fintech cybersecurity. And, when we were having the conversation preparing for this, you mentioned a lot of the common mistakes that fintechs make. You basically started just shooting them off one by one. So I was wondering, while we wait for some more questions to come in here, what do you think is like the most frequent or, the most problematic mistake that fintechs usually make when it comes to cybersecurity?
Well, I think that it's not only typical for fintechs, but we can definitively see a pattern for startups. That a lot of startups are badly allocating their budget for both compliance and cybersecurity. And again, this is the analogy. With the plane, when you are building a plane, don't forget to design it in a way that you can install and actually later mount the parachute before you take off. Because it can save you your life if something goes wrong up in the sky. I know why I think I know why a lot of startups are not building security in from the very beginning. And the reason is that, first of all, there is a wrong perception that cybersecurity is a cost center. It's not. It's not any. Maybe it used to be, but it's not anymore. Secondly, well, not everyone likes to deal with complex problems, and I understand that point of view. However, you need to deal with it, and you need to build a trust with your customers, users, etc. And you cannot build a trust again without cybersecurity. And one of the root causes I found myself is that in a book called Blitzscaling, there is again an analogy with a startup and building and plane building process. And that analogy says that it's like picking up some parts of the airplane, running very quickly and jumping off from the cliff and trying to put a working airplane from all the parts you managed to grab while running towards the cliff. And obviously some companies fail building the flying plane, and some are able to build a plane that will somehow fly, for better or worse, but at least will be able to take off. The problem is that this perspective puts cybersecurity completely out of your sight. And again, I would never enter a commercial plane just for me, for single passenger, without any proper inspections in place and without, for example, a parachute. Because that's my insurance policy. So, but that's a business strategy.
So I wonder, because again, the question was about common mistakes, and you say that some of these startups or fintechs that are just starting up, they forget about the parachute. They forget to make this a part of their budget, or they see cybersecurity as a cost center. What would you say to those people to try to change their mind, and what would your advice be? What steps should these people take?
Well, first of all, I would like to mention that actually building security in is kind of obligation as long as you are processing European Union citizens' personal data, because this is exactly what GDPR Article 25, Privacy by Default, Privacy by Design says, in translation to technical and procedural aspects. So if you are skipping the cybersecurity in the first place, you are actually facing a fine up to 20 million euros. I don't think this is a very wise strategy to start a business with possible fine of that amount.
Yeah, I see.
So this is the rule number one. There is also another mistake that I would like to discuss and address right now, and there is a huge gap right now in the market for cybersecurity professionals. The reason for that is that you simply cannot teach cybersecurity within days or weeks or even months. It's sometimes it takes years. Nowadays, there are a lot of different magical online courses and tutorials that promise everyone to be a hacking experts within hours, days, or weeks.
Yeah, I've seen some of them.
Yeah, it's not possible. You can try to teach basics of programming or system administration in probably weeks to months. but not cybersecurity, because it's a mixture of many different disciplines. So it's not that easy.
I see.
So do not trust those online courses, because what you will get in the end is a false sense of security, and that's very bad. So how can you address those two issues? Well, first of all, remember that most security standards and regulation, including GDPR, that basically applies to any business I can think of, not just fintech sector, is based on risk analysis. And the risk analysis actually can show you how you can allocate properly your budget and your other resources to manage cybersecurity, at least in a way that you will get proper compliance and you will not be facing any fines. And that's, I would say, that's a pretty good starting point.
I see.
Secondly, there are a lot of things that can be automated and can be outsourced. So, for example, I guess a lot of fintechs are very cloud aware and cloud friendly, and they love clouds, cloud service providers, because it's a easy and sometimes very cheap option to quickly start delivering your services. The same with cybersecurity. You can simply outsource it, and it's probably cheaper than trying to be best at everything. So, for example, at none of companies I am managing, we years ago resigned from building our own financial departments because simply the cost was too high comparing to the ability of outsourcing the same service. At one point at AVETINS, when the cloud was getting really secure, we also scrapped all our IT infrastructure that was on premise, because managing it wasn't our core service.
I see.
We couldn't do that for many years because the hosting providers weren't secure enough for our customers. But when they adopted all the security standards and it was the market was regulated, the whole situation had changed. So just take your chance.
Okay, so a few things to address here. One thing that I wanted to mention first is we had a comment coming in from Hans saying, asking, is this live or pre-recorded? It's live, as you can probably
tell. Hi Hans, great to see you, by the way.
Okay, right. So we've got some friends here. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask them live.
Now we have a proof it's live, not pre-recorded.
Yeah, if it were pre-recorded, that would be a little bit spooky if it worked like that, right? Yeah. So, so what I'm kind of drawing from what you just said with regards to, approaches to the cloud is it your opinion that the cloud is, mature enough, and using services like AWS, for example, is a mature enough solution now in terms of security that you don't have to worry about it that much? Where, like, how seriously should I be approaching this? How much can I trust those kinds of solutions?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for that, because just a couple of days ago, we've finished a new white paper. It's not published, but will be published within a couple of days, about common misconceptions about cloud security. And the thing is that the current solutions, the current services that are enabled between most or the main cloud service providers are quite secure. The problem is, and they're sometimes even secure by default, which means you don't need to do a lot to make them more secure or to increase the security level to the level you would accept or need. The problem is, however, that usually you need to interoperate with different environments, different application services, etc. And then you need to somehow configure those cloud services. And this is the weak spot. So you cannot simply accept the fact that the cloud is either secure by default or insecure by default, somewhere in the middle. And it all depends on how you will configure it. And there is a huge, I would say, problem right now that there is a race between cloud service providers, and those services are evolving very quickly. I would say sometimes too quickly, which means that both the end customers and even the cloud service providers sometimes doesn't know exactly what's inside. Which also means that you don't have proper up-to-date documentation in place, and that means that you also cannot just rely on documentation, for example, to do a hardening process. You need to know exactly how it works, sometimes internally. And there is a great example. For example, a lot of people tend to just asking us, why are we constantly returning to the problem of security of server firmwares? Since there are no firmwares anymore, since there are no physical servers, everything is in the cloud.
It's all serverless now, yeah.
Yes. However, under every serverless environment, somewhere deep down, there is a hypervisor with a set of virtual machines and containers on top of it. And underneath, there is still a number of physical servers.
Right.
And all of those have firmwares that actually define the core and the base security level of the whole infrastructure. So you cannot simply, in some cases, obviously, take out this firmware from the complete picture of cybersecurity and your risk analysis, for example.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of like a hand-waving technique, oh, it's in the cloud, and not a lot of people stop to think, what does that actually mean? And the cloud is also servers, just somewhere else. I have a follow-up question about that, but the questions coming in on LinkedIn and YouTube are the most important for me. So Marcin Zabawa has a question. Let's try and address it. He's saying, Aleksander, do you see a surge of interest in cybersecurity since COVID started? Do you see it evenly distributed among different kinds of companies? For example, digital versus brick and mortar companies, startups versus established businesses, etc.
Well, I would say that as an industry, we did something very wrong for last 20-something plus years, especially in the field of education, because normal people do not understand cybersecurity. The introduction of GDPR started to change this landscape, because people started to start talking about their privacy, and leaks of passwords and private privacy data from social networks did also help in increasing interest among normal mortals. However, there is still plenty to be done. So I would say that obviously a lot of companies that had to quickly switch on to digital transformation, they started asking about cybersecurity. But a lot of just had to done it, and when they've done it, they are still fighting to somehow survive in a new world and the new economy. So again, they probably either pushing cybersecurity right now a bit away and trying to just move the matter further into their pipeline, or they are ignoring, or they are not aware of the problem, and that's that's quite typical. We've seen it already. Well, again, not everyone remembers, but there was, for example, an issue of Millennium bug, and everyone was scared that the power plants will shut down. That never happened. However, the COVID time is a bit different, and I believe we are facing a complete change of the world we know.
Yeah. Well, that I think everyone can agree with, that the world is now a lot more different, a lot more digital. So cybersecurity is, well, at least in my opinion, it's more important than it was even just a few
It
years
will
ago
be
or back.
definitively. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's not yet there, but it will be, because again, it's like, as you know, I like different analogies. So
No way.
if you move back, let's say 50, 60 years, you will notice that most car manufacturers wouldn't install by default seat belts. This was only an option that you had to pay additionally.
Yeah.
Now today it's impossible not only to sell a car without seat belts, it's also illegal to drive a car without the seat belts.
Yeah.
And the same will happen with cybersecurity. So those companies that will ignore the problem will be gone.
I see. Okay, so, well, first of all, Marcin, I hope that answers the question. Feel free to ask a follow-up. That's number one. Second, that's fascinating. So I'm thinking, if I'm reading that correctly, do you think that companies are right now building their cars without seatbelts, so to speak? And if so, what I'm curious about is, well, if so, then what is the seatbelt then? Could you, specifically point to, elements within the cybersecurity infrastructure that you think are going to be obvious and default and they aren't right now?
Well, definitively the GDPR compliance, but the true compliance, not just some simple solution that says like putting a sticker, we are GDPR compliant. That won't work eventually.
I see.
And this is a good starting point, because actually when you are thinking about GDPR compliance, you are also thinking a lot about different areas of cybersecurity, both how you align your processes, about your security policy, but also a lot about, for example, software development. Because again, coming back to Article 25, privacy by default, privacy by design, if you think about it, it perfectly well translates into both DevOps and DevSecOps processes. Because, for example, a secure development lifecycle is all about building in security into the software that you are and services that you are actually first designing. Then you draw the whole architecture, and then only then you start coding. And when you are starting to code, you also have different safeguards in place, either static analysis of code and rules for not using, for example, insecure API functions. And you can make more safe deployments or builds in your CI pipeline. So every commit, for example, may trigger not only a build of your application, but also a different set of tests, for example.
I see. That sounds like a lot of things to potentially do. And what I'm hearing is some of these companies should be thinking about implementing this secure development lifecycle. So, I want to make these conversations as actionable as we possibly can. So let's say maybe I'm hearing about it for the first time. Maybe I've been hearing about it and I want to start implementing it. You showed a range of options. How do I actually, in actionable terms, actual steps, where do I go to start implementing this secure development lifecycle?
Well, the very beginning, it really comes down to I would say, to the culture of a company. And answering a question I see, do you think companies right now are not future-proofing their products? I would say that really depends on the company, because obviously there are some that are doing it, and there are some that aren't doing it. And the world is definitively not a black and white place. It's more complex. So there are some organizations somewhere in between. However, assuming that the organization culture and the organization culture is that we are aware of cybersecurity, and we want to deal with it, and we want to do something about it. If assuming it's in the place, then introduction of secure development lifecycle is the first step. But then obviously you need to properly design all the activities within the secure development lifecycle. And a lot of people tend to speak about education. I would say that education is showing us that it's not really working for last few decades at least.
I see.
Because if it would work, then we wouldn't be speaking about cybersecurity right now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be, okay, so for last more than 20 years, I'm speaking about easy to guess static passwords. And honestly speaking, I'm kind of fed up and bored speaking about the same case all over again. And so education isn't working because people are making completely the same mistake all over and repeating it.
I see.
So I would say the education is important for changing the mindset and the culture, but not trying to teach everyone to be a cybersecurity expert. It won't work. Similarly, you do not try to teach everyone to be a lawyer expert, for example.
Yeah.
So
I suppose that's where the sorry if I may, I suppose that's where the by design part comes in, right? I don't have to know what a strong password looks like, because when I put in a weak password when I'm signing up for a new account, it tells me no, that's not good enough, try again, right? So that's exactly, I suppose that's part of being secure by design.
Yes, but the problem is that, for example, if you move the same rules from your passwords to the secrets you are using, for example, for application deployment, in many cases you do not have a input field that actually prevents you from first of all using a weak secret or well-known secret or default secret, and secondly, there shouldn't be any such box in the input field in the first place, because you shouldn't be using static secrets. Instead, they should be strongly randomized and generated, for example, automatically.
I see. Okay, that's great. That's one definitely one step to take a look at these secrets. As both you and I can see, we have a lot of comments rolling in. I was thinking maybe we'll take a moment to address them. So what have we got here? Martin Zabala says, thank you, does answer my question, but then he goes on. The only thing is that a government can easily restrict non-seatbelt cars, and that can't be easily done on a national level for the digital world. So do you imagine those kinds of regulations being prepared and agreed upon on the EU level?
Yes, and actually it's happening. And it happened already. GDPR is one example. The NIS directive is another example. And obviously there are some sectors regulations. If you look at the payment sector, for example, there's a PCI DSS standard requirement for many years already, which might seem simple because it's on a high level, it's only 12 requirement points. But if you read it carefully, it's more than 140 something requirements, sometimes very specific. So you simply cannot ignore it. And now, for example, in European Union, there is a huge discussion about not only critical infrastructure, but also about, for example, Internet of Things, because it's a next huge challenge. So yes, such regulation will be, there are already in place, and coming back to GDPR, but there will be more. You can be sure of that. Which, by the way, I'm not sure we are going or we're heading into right direction, because the worst thing can happen from fintech perspective is to over-regulate the innovative market, because then it kills the innovation.
Right, and that can put, for example, the European Union behind other,
yes,
areas of the world. I see. So, First of all, thank you for answering. I'm trying to keep things a little bit,
You're welcome.
disciplined and organized here. So coming to that in just a second. Hans, or should I say Hans, left a few comments. It's easy to get certificates for education, but there's a shortage of skilled people. So, the standards are getting lowered. Would you, and also everyone is calling themselves a senior these days.
I completely agree with Hans. Yeah, together with Hans, we played this game for decades. So but I remember this joke about someone sending a CV, and he was the creator of particular technology, and the requirement was that you need to have like 5+ years of experience. And the author of the technology said, okay, I have only 3 because it's 3 years ago I've invented that technology myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes there is the opposite problem, but usually, yes, everyone nowadays is a senior. And it's not just about the time, but it's also about the complexity of the projects somebody delivered, because you can be 5 years within cybersecurity sectors, but if the only thing you've done, for example, you are proofreading audits or pen testing reports, obviously you got some experience, but it's not experience we are talking about right now.
Exactly. Yeah, years of experience is not everything. We had a similar discussion within SDX Next about developers and senior developers, and whether it should be, well, we were talking about them being young in terms of age, but yeah, one of the takeaways that Łukasz Koczwara, our VP of Engineering, had was that it's not only about, how many years you've been working, but also what you've been doing with those years. This brings me to an interesting question. At least I hope it's interesting. I'm going to ask you, and you're going to judge that. Some people might not want to, outsource cybersecurity. I imagine some people are going to want to hire for it. And, with your experience, I suppose you'd be a great person to ask, when you hire for cybersecurity roles, what advice would you offer somebody who's hiring? What should they look for? What kind of criteria should they take into account, especially if they don't know, a lot about cybersecurity?
Well, I can only share you with parts of our methodology of hiring we developed over the years. So my first question is always about a passion, because you definitively want someone who's running based on his passion for cybersecurity. Otherwise, cybersecurity is a tough and can be stressful job. Which means that if someone is only for the money, he or she can quickly burn out and will not deliver what you are looking for. So I would say the passion is very, very interesting thing.
Okay, so let me ask you then.
Yeah.
How do you check for that? You have got a conversation with somebody, it's an hour. What questions do you ask to check if they've got the passion for it?
Well, there are many of different ways, I think, of evaluating if someone is passionate about something. Obviously, well, the simple answer is you start to chat with a person, and from the way someone describes a particular discipline, you can quickly imagine if the person is passionate about it or not. Obviously, there is a pitfall, because there are a lot of people who are not as open as, for example, we are. And they may be very passionate, but they might keep it more for themselves. So
right.
But that's, I would say, again, this is kind of problem with IT, that not everyone is open. And secondly, you can, for example, ask a simple question. Okay, so can you tell me how many books you have read in last, let's say, 2 years? And what kind of books there were? And if somebody will tell you, okay, so I've read like a dozen books about cybersecurity, and he can actually tell you something about those books, then probably he did it. And that again, this could be a proof that he's passionate about something. But it's up to you. There are so many different methods. The other important question we always ask is we prepare some kind of test, and that's actually an interesting story, because we know that some people are not working very well under interview conditions.
Yeah.
So many years ago, we allowed people to take the case we wanted them to work on as kind of homework, and present us with a result, let's say, within the next couple of days.
Oh, that's interesting.
Until we had the case of a gentleman who actually gave this homework case to some of his friends, and they jointly solved the case. And obviously, 2 weeks later, after we hired the person, we knew he wasn't capable of solving the case or the problem he got. So we changed the procedure, and now we are giving the case to be solved during an interview. So sorry for that, but that's how we had to address this problem.
I guess you could say that process wasn't secure, right?
Well, again, there isn't anything 100% secure. You have to optimize, and we simply or we harden the process because everything is evolving constantly. The threats and the attack classes are evolving as well. So so somebody attacked our interview process. We detected quickly, so you can say that our intrusion detection worked pretty well, and we addressed the problem immediately.
Yeah, that makes me curious, actually, because you said there are different types of threats, and I know that this is an area that's constantly evolving. More and more is happening all the time. All right, I should mention the comment that's coming in. Hans is leaving another one. I spent 1 week with Aleksander locked up in a hotel on an island. I am curious about that story.
Well, that's a comment you can misunderstand, actually.
Yeah.
We weren't there alone.
Okay. Okay, it's good to know.
But yes, it's true. And but the island was pretty big anyway.
Right. And in a sense, we're all on an island right now.
Yep.
Just depends on the size of the island. Anyway, what was I talking about? Types of threats. So can you let our watchers and listeners know a little bit about what they probably don't know about, the types of threats, the types of attacks that are happening these days that they probably have no idea about and they should be aware of? Can you give some examples here?
Well, I think giving an example is a wrong approach from the very beginning, because it's evolving so quickly.
Sorry about that.
So anything we are talking about right now is already outdated. So I would rather shift this discussion towards more proactive thinking, that instead of trying to address what's outdated, what can we do with it? And the answer is we have to be proactive in terms of cybersecurity, which means that, for example, hardening is very important, because instead of trying to address the attack we've learned yesterday, we're trying from the very beginning to address what's unknown by providing, for example, a multiple layers of security. And that's crucial. And that allows you to actually address the issues or attack classes or different vulnerabilities or exploits as they come to your network or to your application, and that keeps you also prepared for unknown, which is very crucial in terms of security, right? Because it's easy to deal with what you know. So, for example, if you think about malware, it's not just about protecting from the known malware today. It's actually about being protected from unknown malware that will be designed tomorrow or within next week or month or year.
Yeah. That approach makes a lot of sense to me. I do have a follow-up question. Again, some comments to address here. Yeah, so Hans meant that it's a good way to learn about somebody's passion, and the best way to hire someone and to learn about their passion is to take him or her to a bar. I've never tried that personally.
Yeah, that works pretty well, especially if there is a lot of good alcohol available.
That's great. So look, coming back to what you said, I love the approach of preparing for the unknown, because if you keep thinking about the known threats, you'll always be one step behind. That makes a lot of sense to me, but you probably can guess at this point that I'm looking for steps, for things that people can actually do. So how do you prepare for what you don't know that is coming your way? You mentioned something about layers of security. Could you go a little bit deeper into that so that the people watching can put some things on their to-do list, some things that they should Google or research? Where, which direction would you point them in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yes, the multi-layered security model is very important. So basically, the basic rule is that you cannot rely on a simple and single safeguard in your model. Instead, you need to introduce a layered approach, which means that you have multiple safeguards. How it works in practice. So first of all, if you imagine your software stack, and let's talk about serverless stack, because it's quite popular nowadays and it's great for microservices. So you start with securing your container or runtime. If, for example, you are running AWS infrastructure, Lambda functions, for example, or functions in Microsoft Azure. So you start securing this part. Then you move up and you have your application, your databases. You secure that by hardening, by enabling encryption, by enabling stronger access control. Again, you move up and you have your application, you have your source code, which can be also both statically and dynamically tested. You can run a set of security rules. Nowadays, basically any development environment provides you some functionality to do static testing and banning, for example, insecure function calls or insecure cryptography. That's very important. And it's changing so quickly, because if you take, again, go back 10 years and look at what we were considering as a strong cryptography, you might be surprised how many algorithms and their version are not considered secure anymore today. So again, you need to remember in the whole process that something that's considered secure today probably will not be considered secure tomorrow or within next month or year. It's really changing. So you need to repeat all those steps constantly. It's not just one single job. It's a process. That's why we call it a process, because you need to repeat it constantly.
Yeah.
Then again, you move up, and then you have access rights for your customers, for example, that also need to be managed. Those customers they need to access your services or your application. So we are talking about strong authentication and authorization, for example, multi-factor authentication. Again, and this is how you introduce multiple layers of security, and but it's only possible if you design the security from the very beginning, because you actually need to design all those processes and all those layers of security before you starting to deploy your software. Because if you deploy your software, your application, your service, whatever, without all those safeguards in place, it's sometimes next to impossible to add all those layers of security, or it's very expensive, or it's very time consuming.
Yeah, it's like with building software in general. If you resolve some issues at the design stage, then it's much easier than just trying to redo the code when it's already in production. I have follow-up questions, but so do our watchers, and that is always more important to me. So let's jump into the question coming from Hans. I see two questions here. I wonder about the first one if you'd like us to ask for additional context, that's okay. I'm going to just read it and you tell me if it's something you can address. So we've got two. First is what is the future of AI with regards to automatic response? So, and the second is, are we able as a security profession in the long run to keep up with the attackers? So how would you address that? And should we ask for more info here?
No, actually, let's divide it to two different questions. So let's start with the first. First of all, I think AI has a great future in automating a lot of things in cybersecurity, but not only in response. And I would say that response is just one of the challenging areas that should be addressed. However, currently AI is great because it's not so wise. Actually, it's not that intelligent. We say it's on the level of 4-year-old child. So, but still, it can be great for many things. And the other thing is that what we as programmers would call a simple switch case loop or simple if-else loop. It's often called AI, and this is not what we are talking about. We're talking right now about real AI, because if you go back many years at the end of or in the early 90s, antivirus software was using something called heuristic approach, which today would be called AI, which is not real AI, to detect malware, and it was pretty successful in that. So with even better AI, the real AI, we can definitively use it to not only to detect but to respond with some simple actions that usually would not scale well with just people. Secondly, we can use AI for hardening and testing purposes. And this is, again, the area when AI can scale, I believe, very well. The second question, will we be able to keep up with the attackers? Well, I would say that we probably aren't able if you define the problem in a very specific way. Because, for example, I would say it's not possible to have a single person who would know, for example, all the malwares available right now, all the exploits or the vulnerabilities from top of his head. It's simply impossible due to the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, humans are not able to keep up for probably at least a decade or even longer. Now, if we move the problem to more high level, well, I think we are still doing pretty well as humans to trying to keep up with all the new attackers. Why? Because as long as those attackers are also humans, they have the same limitations we have.
Right.
And so this makes us able to keep up. That disproportion that there was also always more attackers than those who would defend, it's typical. And again, if you look at the medieval castles, for example, you could defend with a lot less people your perimeter just by using proper constructions than you need to actually attack and succeed in attack and to win the battle if you were outside of the castle.
Yeah, so well, I hope that will hold true for cybersecurity as well. One thing that's on my mind that I'm a little bit worried about is that AI is a tool, and we're talking about using it for defense,
Absolutely.
but it's also in the hands of the attackers too, and I wonder what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, and it's being exploited by the attackers already to attack. But again, this is what I love about cybersecurity. It's a race. And it's a race that you simply cannot win the one side or the other, cannot win in the long run. You can only win in a short runs, and then you get up the next day and you have another race. And that's the beauty of cybersecurity, at least from my perspective.
I was going to ask you a question about that actually, but again, I'm left with the problem, with the great problem to have that we have questions coming in. This is probably the last or second to last question we're going to take because we are nearing the 1 hour mark, and we also have some announcements, and we have a code for your tool, Defenselayers, that you can use, and we want to share that with you too. But first, a question coming in from Sławomir Matelski. It's a long one, but I'm going to read it. Can you imagine a world where the user generates strong OTP in his head? Okay, help me out here. OTP, what would that stand for here?
Well, okay, so since the question is quite complex, I make it short. I believe the idea is that a user can generate passwords that's not static. So it's one-time password. OTP stands for
one-time password. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and well, I think, honestly speaking, I think that in the long run, we should kill all the password systems because they are flawed from the very beginning. And why? Because the problem is with user experience. So why do people love logging into their notebooks right now using other techniques like biometry? Because it's all about user experience, and obviously that sparked a whole set of new problems because many biometric readers are of poor quality. So you can easily reproduce, for example, a touch of your fingers. That's why there are more advanced biometrics methods like analyzing your voice and, for example, shape and location of your veins in your hand. And there are many more examples. But actually, I think that strong OTP is something of a past, because we as a humans, you like to use your phone if you can just touch it and the phone somehow, or mobile device, decides that it's you. You don't want to enter any passwords. It's wrong from the very beginning, from human perspective, not from the security perspective. And now from the security perspective, anything that's inconvenient, you need to remember something, you need to calculate something, you need to do something, you need to carry something with you as something additional. It won't be accepted by the market and by the humans.
Yeah, exactly. That gives me a lot of things to follow up on, and I wish we had a little bit more time. Well, first of all, Sławomir, thank you for the question. And
very interesting question indeed. Thank you for that.
Okay, so look, I have just one final question from me, just because I cannot, leave this without asking this question. I hope you can give an answer that's a little bit concise. I don't want to keep people too long, but I have to ask. You've been talking about cybersecurity for almost an hour now here, and your enthusiasm it's infectious, if I'm honest. So, where does your passion for cybersecurity come from? What's the secret here?
Well, I think this is kind of, some would say that probably it's a mental illness. But why do people are passionate about something? This is not my only life passion, to be clear. So there are plenty of other great things I'm doing besides cybersecurity. But in my case, this is first of all, this is the knowledge that every day I will have a new challenge, a new race, and every day I need to learn something new. I would say those are the three pillars that my passion stands on. However, I would say it's very personal, and it really comes down to a particular person. I know a lot of people says that, after, for example, 40 or 50, they don't want to learn something new. I think it's very bad. And living in a challenging environment, keeps me always awake, and I've learned so many great things. Oh, and I was, thanks to cybersecurity, I was close for 1 week on the island with Hans. So there are a lot of advantages to that.
And that's oh my god, that's an
And
amazing
not only
answer.
Hans. So
Yeah. Not only him. That's good to mention. And I know you're not just passionate about cybersecurity because you're also passionate about analogies. Miko in the comments says another very good analogy with the castle. It put me at ease too, I have to say. All right, we are at the 1 hour mark, so we should be going to wrapping up. But well, thank you first of all for being here. Thanks everybody for the comments. We have a few announcements before we go. Let's start with the most important announcement. So I promised, in all the marketing materials, in all the event descriptions, that we're going to give people a taste of Defenselayers. So we talked a little bit about Defenselayers. So let's say give us a short pitch, and then if you can share how people can get access to Defenselayers and try it for themselves, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, well, if you would like to test our secure container images, and please do, obviously, especially if you want to take some of the complexity and other cybersecurity issues out of the way and concentrate on doing your business. It's very simple. Just send us an email with a secret static password. That's STX. The secret password. Send us an email to sales at defenselayers.com, and we will send you a password and access to our secure images registry, so you will be able to download and use our secure container images for next 30 days.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think from what you told me, the access is going to be assigned to the email address that sent the email. Is that still true?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so make sure that you use an email that you like for this. That's going to work for this.
Use your real email, not the false one.
Yeah, don't use a 10-minute mail, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, I might as well do a pitch on our side. In case you're wondering, in case you're meeting us for the first time, we're STX Next. We build software for companies, most primarily using Python, but whatever idea you have in your head, we can help, and you want to turn that into software, we can help you discover it, define it, design it, and then develop it, and then deploy it. I had this in my head, this sequence. I hope I said it in the right order there. And by the way, if you liked Tech Leaders Hub, if you're a tech leader yourself, do drop us a line if you'd like to be our next guest. We're looking for guests who are tech leaders themselves, who would like to talk about what they're passionate about, just like Alex did here. And what I'm passionate about is just interviewing interesting and smart people, just like we did today. Alex, any other announcements for our audience? Anything else you'd like to mention before I click the end broadcast button?
You can now imagine what Hans had to went through having me on that island for a week. You guys had me only for 1 hour, so thank you for keeping up with us. It was very exciting and a great pleasure, Jakub, talking to you. Thank you for the invitation. Hope to repeat it in some future, hopefully not too distant.
Yeah.
And stay healthy and away from the virus.
Oh yeah, that too, everyone. Stay healthy, get vaccinated if you can, so we can all move on to a future that's maybe a little bit less digital compared to right now, with a lot of people staying home. That's a great note to end on. Stay safe. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I will see you next time.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye.